I get the opportunity to come after two excellent presenters with, three, Rob, Dave, and then Mike. I know all of them personally and or just met Dave, but I thought, listening to Dave, that we must have collaborated in a previous life because a lot of what he was talking about really has informed my own thinking and what we've tried to do at Pinnacle. So just a little bit about myself. I didn't start out to be a CRSP, a Canadian Registered Safety Professional. I got my start in the business as a tree planter a long time ago. I worked 25 years in the industry, progressed up through until I found myself as a partner in a large company with over 600 seasonal employees, doing tree planting, firefighting, a little bit of salvage logging, other forestry activities. And somewhere along the way, I came to believe that safety had to be part of that business. And so I became the safety guy at our company. My partners fobbed off all the safety stuff on me, but they gave me free rein to try stuff out and to get a safety program going, which eventually evolved into a safety management system. And we saw great results. And so over time, I kept adding to my safety toolkit. And when I got out of the business in 2005, I thought, okay, this is perfect timing. I am now a safety consultant. And I went out to help other companies implement things. I was an auditor. And I found myself suddenly invited to come work with the brand new Forest Safety Council. So spent 5 years there focusing on training. Ended my time sort of shortly after Rob came on board and went back to being a consultant. Being a consultant is great because you just tell other people what they should be doing and you have no responsibility for actually doing it. And that worked fine for a while until I got the itch, and just over a year ago, Pinnacle gave me an opportunity to join them as their Director of Health and Safety. Okay, now the theory ends and the practice starts. So I've been there just over a year, and we're on a pretty remarkable journey, as Mike mentioned. I've worked a lot with Mike over the past year and a half, much more than I've spent more time with him than I ever thought I would spend with any WorkSafe officer ever, and it's been mostly positive. But, so I wanted to just share from a practical point of view some of the things we've done, particularly around employee engagement and reporting. And as I started preparing, I realized I couldn't really do that without setting a little bit of the context for how this all got started. So the focus of the presentation is on employee reporting, but it goes a little further back than that. So who is Pinnacle Renewable Energy? Well, we're Canada's largest wood pellet manufacturer. We've got 7 plants located around the province. We got 2 down in the Okanagan here and up through Williams Lake, Quesnel, Burns Lake, Houston, all the way out to our marine terminal in Prince Rupert. And 275 plus employees in those plants operate 24/7, 365 days a year. So, I sleep with my phone on. And I've had a couple of calls in the middle of the night, and I'll tell you, you get that call, your heart races because it's never good news and it's going to require a response. But our motto, somebody came up with this, I don't know if it was the marketing department, but safely produce quality pellets on time and on budget. Great concept. We've covered off safety, we've covered off quality, and we've covered off production, kind of the big 3 legs to the stool. But the challenge is, how do you actually make that a reality? So, we kind of found ourselves in a position where we were having unacceptable injury rates. And part of our business involved a high rate of employee turnover at different locations. We never had achieved the targets that had been set for production as an organization. We had a very difficult relationship with WorkSafe BC, largely adversarial. And then in October 2014, we had a really significant event occur. We had an explosion at one of our plants, and 3 contractor employees were injured in that event. So this was after the wood dust explosions had happened in Lakeland and Babine. There'd been a lot of focus on combustible dust. Our incident didn't involve combustible dust. It involved something, a new emerging threat that really very little is known about. Synthetic gas, synthesis gas. It's created through the process of managing, working with heat and wood fiber. But that event occurred, and it really threw the organization into a bit of a tailspin. So, change is hard. Any change in a safety culture is really challenging. Rob talked about the change that started in 2004, 2005, and the catalyst of an unacceptable high rate of fatalities in the forest industry. Eventually, people said, enough is enough. Unsafe is unacceptable. We've got to make some difference in how we do our business. So Pinnacle had that moment post-2014, and my boss now, Scott Bax, Senior VP of Operations, connected with the CEO of the organization, Rob McCurdy, and said, we're going to do things differently, and we're going to get everybody together, and we're going to start working on how we turn this company around. And Scott's, one of his favorite saying, and I heard it alluded to earlier, is Einstein's famous insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And so we knew that we had to change how we did things. So this safety journey, and Dave has it in his presentation, started with getting that senior management commitment. We will do what it takes to turn this organization around and make that difference. And then we brought together, I wasn't on board at that point yet, but they brought together all of the key players, the managers of the plants, people who did the work, and got together and said, how do we address this? What do we have to look at? And they had to be brutally honest with where the company was actually at. What are we actually doing? And face the reality. But then part of it also was that vision of where would we like to be? How would we like to see ourselves? And so that belief that, you know what? We're not there. We're a long ways from it, but we believe that we're going to get to or aim for 0 fires, because that's one of our major risk areas, and 0 incidents, translated to injuries and other types of losses. And a key part of that is it's going to take 100% engagement of all of our employees. And these were things that emerged out of that group as commitments. So, some of the steps that we took following that then was we got to look at where is our risk. And we kind of determined that 20% of our activities give rise to 80% of our risk. So let's focus on that 20%. The Pareto principle, you may have heard it before, the rule of 80-20. So we started identifying what are those areas. And I came on board after this process had already been started and sort of some of these key factors identified, but I kind of put it into a pyramid just as a way of visualizing what this initiative was going to look like, this owning safety. And in fact, that phrase came up from one of the participants in the working group, and he actually said, you know what we're talking about here? He says, it's really about everybody owning safety. Just think about it. Everybody owns safety, has a personal stake in it. So we treated that as our foundational value. And then, of course, built on it, and you've heard people talk about the safety management system, our documentation, our due diligence. Mike covered those things off really well. Out of that, you have all of your policies, your standard operating procedures, your safe work practices. You got to train people. There's education, training, and competency. You see how all these things tie together, even from Mike's presentation. And again, I know kind of how he thinks, but I didn't see his presentation before he gave it. With a focus on new and young workers. The pellet industry is a little bit different than a lot of the wood products sector, where a large component of our workforce is fairly young. And we've got to work with that. We've got guys that are 25 years old that operate the plant and sit in front of multiple screens, and they're controlling everything that happens there. And they're still technically a young worker, and they have one of the most responsible positions. They're good at computers, but there's other areas to think about as well. And then those kind of 4 boxes at the top identify probably our major areas of risk. So CS, confined space, CD, combustible dust, SG, safeguarding, and LO, lockout. So maybe these things don't apply to your business in particular. You're going to have to figure out, if you follow a similar journey, what are your areas of risk. And of course, for us, overlying or right beside all that is a large contractor base. Right from the people who deliver the fiber to our plants, to the people who are in on shutdowns, to contractors who are in on a day-to-day basis, whether they're grinding logs or whatever they're doing. So we had to look at contractor management. And so from that, kind of some key focus areas for the roadmap were created. You know, how are we going to get there? Everybody needs to address unsafe acts or conditions all the time, at the time. We want 100% of our close calls and incidents reported and investigated. Employees need to be trained and qualified for their jobs and competency assessed. And then a key one, management recognizes and rewards employees demonstrating safe behaviors. From that, we pulled together the leaders and the teams that were going to be addressing these issues. We developed the plan, we communicated it internally, even took the step of taking that plan and putting it in front of WorkSafe and said, this is what we are going to do. You can judge us on this plan and how well we execute. And they did. They would come out to our plants and say, you know, you, utility worker with the broom there, what do you know about owning safety? And they would expect that that individual would be able to articulate our plan and be able to talk about their part in it. And then we measured and reported on progress, and we do that on a weekly basis with a management call. And quarterly, we take a deeper dive and reassess and regroup and restructure as necessary. So how's it going? Well, I have kind of some things I talk about, lagging indicators, things that have happened we measure. So our medical incident rate, if you look, 2014 was around 7 people. So that's if you had 100 workers in a year, 7 of them would have a significant injury of some sort that would require medical treatment. Through the course of 2015, that number dropped to 3. And so far in 2015, we're running at about 1.5. You know, we still don't want to hurt 1.5 people per 100, but we're making progress. Now here's an interesting one. We track our first aids. Well, 2014, we had less than 20 first aids. You know, a number that you compare to that medical incident rate, and then kind of interesting. 2015, it goes up, and if we project through 2016, we're going to end up with way more first aids. Why is that? We're getting more reporting. We're actually understanding what is actually going on out there. Obviously, in 2014, we probably had as many injury claims with WorkSafe as we actually had first aid reports. So anything minor was not getting captured. So I started thinking when I came on board, we need to really move into leading indicators. We need to start getting proactive. And so we had a number of tools that were, you know, paper booklets that had hazard reporting on them. We had some employee observation forms that we used. And those things kind of, if they were done, at least my impression by and large was they kind of went into a box somewhere to die a slow and painful death, or maybe they got merged in with our fiber supply and turned into wood pellets, but not much was done with them. And so we looked at, well, what are the areas we want information on? We'd like to know about hazards and close calls. We want to give people the opportunity to give us information about how to make the business better, and we call those good catches. Then there are the peer-to-peer and contractor observations. And then something we call an owning safety conversation, which is where workers talk about owning safety and how to do the job better, how to communicate with each other on safety topics. Because one of the hardest things that there is out there as you start to bring about this change is how do you get somebody to talk to their peer and say, you know, I care for you and I want you to be safe, and that's why I'm not comfortable with what you're doing. We all have pride, and it's very hard to have that conversation, but we're encouraging those to happen, and we're seeing them happen. So we kind of set this system up, and I'm not here to do an infomercial, but we were using an online system called DATS. We're using it for our training and orientations. It's a company based here in Vernon, and we were getting really good results with the employees being comfortable with that system. And it was very flexible, and it allowed us to design and have our own online reporting. Not going to work for everybody, but particularly given the age of our workforce and the flexibility of that tool, we used it, and we just started getting reporting happening. So I just want to jump here. So again, looking at our reported hazards and close calls, this is what the numbers were showing us. 2014, we had 67 reported close calls and hazards. I'd say 100% of those were reported by a manager or a supervisor. We had very low employee engagement. In 2015, we slowly started building that, and by the end of the year, we were at 422. In the first quarter, this is not a projected number, this is actual for 2016, we have 876, January, February, March, sorry, not the first quarter, through April, the first 4 months, we have 876 reports. Now, how do those show? Well, you can see starting back in December, January, February, March, April, each one of those bands of colors represents a different one of our plants. So you can see some plants are really strong, maybe a larger plant. Other plants are quite thin in their band. But it kind of, you can see sort of the projected numbers there, what's getting reported now on a monthly basis. And this is hazards, close calls, and those other things I mentioned. You know, some of the plants show a strong, steady, continual growth. Some have tapered off, and actually overall we're tapering off. So this week, Monday, we met with the managers and we talked about that. And here's one of the feedback pieces. Our workers are telling us that they have reported so many hazards that we've actually fixed, they're struggling to find new hazards to report. Well, that's a good problem to have. So we're actually going to move them into reporting in other areas. So here's what this pie chart, 821 of the reports that we've had are hazards or similar. 389 are what we call our good catches, those proactive safety improvement suggestions. And they go beyond safety. They get into productivity. They get into quality. It's just about anything that'll help make the business better. The observations, the worker peer observations, 272. The safety conversations, 248. And then the contractor is a smaller slice right now. So over time, I expect to see that brown half of the circle is going to get smaller, and I fully expect to see the peer observations and the conversations getting larger as we develop this culture. And the good catches, you know, I thought at the beginning, if we got like 10% good ideas out of this whole thing, it would be a success. I'm actually saying now, like we're getting, you know, there's a lot of I watched Joe work and he was wearing all his PPE and that was a good, you know, thumbs up to Joe. Okay, there's not much value there. It does help promote the safety consciousness and awareness, but probably 25% of the stuff we're getting is actually valuable. And what are we doing with it? Well, actually one more slice here. About half of the reports are thumbs up positives, and about half are opportunities to improve. And we like that ratio because I believe firmly that the positives do as much to motivate and promote safety as we need to fix something. Another piece of the reporting that we find useful is they categorize whether the potential is something related to injury, equipment or property damage, environmental issues, smolders or fires, because that's significant for us, production losses, quality, and then very small bit here on harassment or violence. So you can kind of see the primary is the yellow, that's the main aspect of that incident or report, and then the secondary, the red. But it gives us just a risk profile. What are concerns that the employees are having? So what are the keys to success of this program for us? I mean, we're not out of the woods. We're really early in the game. You know, I'm watching to see what that trend line does over the next few months. But the accountability started at the top, right from leadership, CEO, senior VP, total commitment to this, total support for it, right down to the incentives, whether there's bonuses involved or draws for different things, you know, bought in right at the top. That was key. We kept it fairly simple. It's an easy tool to use. It's a digital, so we can have access to all that information really readily. We set targets. We actually say, look, we would like to see 2 per employee per week. Now, we're not getting 100% involvement at this point, but I think over time we'll see more of that. But we set those targets and then we keep score. So every week at our managers meeting, every manager sees how their plant did in relation to every other plant. So there's a little bit of competition built in here. And, you know, I don't think it's led to filing bogus reports just for the sake of numbers, because I review almost every single one of them, which I'm not going to keep doing, but I wanted to do it to get a real good sense of where we were at, but it takes a lot of time. We recognize quality, so every week we pull out 4 or 5 of really good ones and we share with everybody in the organization. Now the keys, those are all great things, but here's where we really get into why this is successful and will be in the future. When somebody suggests that we have to deal with a hazard or they have an improvement idea, you have to take action. And you know, a work order system, every one of those suggestions, if it's something that can be addressed with a work order, the number gets put right into the report. The manager has to put that work order in. So if WorkSafe comes along and says, where's your due diligence? We can point to a trail of identifying hazards and taking action on them. And then those are reviewed at safety meetings, which we have in our company every morning or at the start of every shift. And even if there's no action required, we have the managers close the loop on every single one. So it's online, there's the ability to comment. They have to do, even if it's as simple as just saying, thanks, good job. But every single one of those employee submissions gets a manager or a supervisor to give a positive feedback to them, thanking them for their submission. So I think these 2 things, as long as we take action and we keep closing the loop with feedback, where the program is going to continue to have success. And then my job is to be looking at these, assessing the trends and patterns, and developing systems to help address those over time. Thank you. And I could have just as easily entitled my employee reporting presentation, Actively Participate in a Safety Culture, which is the theme of this conference. But I guess my time is up. Is there any questions at all? I'll be here the rest of the day. You can certainly grab me. But, oh, okay. Thank you.